Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, April 24th, 2025 agenda meeting of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. We have a quorum of commissioners here. I'll take the roll to begin. Commissioner Partridge.
Here.
Commissioner Hom.
Here.
And I'm Katie Sieben. A quorum is present, and I would also like to congratulate my colleagues on being confirmed by the Minnesota State Senate yesterday. Both Commissioners Partridge and Commissioner Hom were confirmed, and so we are super excited about that and congratulate you. So we have two items on our agenda today, and then we have two normal agenda items, and then the third item is a discussion item. So we'll take a short break after we finish the first two items of about 10 minutes. We'll see. Sorry, we don't have an exact time. It will start for item number 3. And then we'll take up item number 3, as I said, after a short break. And hopefully Commissioner Sullivan is traveling for work, but hopefully he'll be able to join us for that third item, it sounds like. So we'll begin with docket 24-344. Please introduce the item for us, Mr. Warbola.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Item number 1 is docket number E015M24344 in the matter of the petition of Minnesota Power for approval of investments and expenditures in the Boswell solar project for recovery through Minnesota Power's Renewable Resources Rider under Minnesota Statute 216B-1645. The question before the Commission is, should the Commission approve Minnesota Power's recovery of investments and expenditures in the Boswell solar project to the Renewable Resources Rider? The parties are present and staff is available. Thank you.
And Mr. Warbola, for item number 1, this is not the one we're doing. Are we doing opening comments on item 1?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. If the parties would please come forward, we'll begin with opening comments. How about first from Minnesota Power, then from LIUNA, and followed with the department. Ms. Kuklinski, welcome. Please state your name for the record and go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Jennifer Kuklinski with Minnesota Power. I also want to note that I have some technical experts available today, either in the room or online, in case there are technical questions. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Boswell solar project. This project is special to the company as it demonstrates MP's continued commitment to reinvesting in a host community that has served our energy needs for decades. This project is a unique opportunity to leverage Minnesota Power's existing energy infrastructure and federal tax incentives to bring 85 megawatts of additional solar to the company's generation portfolio, which will reduce emissions and provide enough electricity to power over 20,000 homes with only a relatively small increase in power supply costs. This project, as well as the one that you'll hear about next on the agenda, represent the company's largest investments in solar energy. The project will help the company achieve compliance with the carbon-free energy standard, as well as Minnesota Power's IRP 2021 IRP requirements to add additional in-service solar to our our generation portfolio. This project was selected through a competitive bidding process in compliance with requirements outlined in the company's last approved IRP, including the use of an independent evaluator to evaluate project proposals. The Boswell solar project had the lowest direct rate impact on customers of all the evaluated bids. The Boswell solar project will be connected to Boswell's 230 kV substation via a 2.75 mile 230 kV transmission line. And as the company stated in its petition, this Boswell interconnector line will be designed to utilize the full 959.5 megawatt generation interconnection rights at Boswell. When bidding the project, Minnesota Power followed best practice for project-to-project comparisons by assigning a portion of the Boswell interconnector costs to the project. However, the company believes that designing the line to its full capacity is the prudent approach to preserving the full use of the transmission rights at this location, which will allow for future energy development opportunities at the site and further support the host community transition near Boswell. MP understands that there are concerns raised about preserving the integrity of the bidding process and appreciates those concerns, which is why the company intentionally separated the additional costs associated with designing the Boswell interconnector line to its full capacity in the petition, demonstrating transparency that these costs are, in fact, in addition to what was bid in the RFP. The company feels that the Commission has discretion in this case to approve project costs above the bid costs if they are deemed in the public interest. And Minnesota Power believes that optimizing the Boswell interconnector line will result in lower customer rate impacts over time and provide for future energy development opportunities. If optimized now and recovered through the Renewable Resource Rider as requested, the estimated rate impacts would increase by only 0.1% for residential customers. While the company's intent here today is not to look back at bids after the fact, the company does assess that if the surplus Boswell interconnector costs were included in the bid, the project would have still been selected as one of the 2 lowest cost projects and would have remained significantly lower in cost than any non-selected project through the RFP process. Again, this company demonstrates Minnesota Power's commitment to reinvesting in a community that has supported our energy needs for many, many years. And the company appreciates the thoughtful evaluation of the project from the Department of Commerce, the thorough briefing papers provided by PUC staff, and the company is deeply grateful for many of the supporting comments that were filed in the docket for this project, including those from the City of Cohasset, the Itasca County Economic Development Corporation, the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, LIUNA of Minnesota and North Dakota, and several of its members, the Operating Engineers Local 49 and North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters, and Clean Energy Economy of Minnesota. Minnesota Power can state its preferred decision options if the Commission would like.
Why don't you, please, just do that now?
Chair Sieben, sure. Minnesota Power supports decision options 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Sutton, I didn't call on you earlier, but did you want to go next with comments?
Chair Sieben, members of the Commission, I can be really brief. Our comments are in the record. Here on behalf of the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49, and the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. And I'll speak on both. I know they're 2 separate dockets, but I'll just make our comments brief. Obviously, you saw our comments in the record. We're supportive and look forward to continue. We were part of the IRP process and the settlement that led to the solar in that order, and look forward to working with the company to make these projects a success. So thank you, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. And Mr. Pranis.
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Kevin Pranis on behalf of LIUNA, Minnesota, and North Dakota. The Boswell and Regal, but in particular Boswell, is an incredibly important project for our members, and it's actually why more than a dozen of our members attended the recent site permit hearing in the site permit docket rather than go to their union meeting that night, because this is a critical investment that's happening in the service territory. As far as we know, the largest clean generation investment that Minnesota Power will ever have made within its service territory. As the Commission knows, that was an item of concern that so many of those investments were outside, and both of these are in the service territory. In particular, I would say that's very similar to Sherco Solar, which is one of the most important and successful investments in Minnesota's energy transition, in that we're taking a coal plant infrastructure and a coal plant community and figuring out how to begin, hopefully just the first installment of repurposing and reinvesting in that community, preserving and creating as many jobs as we can for folks who are impacted. And I would say it's not just what's being built, but how. We're particularly excited because Minnesota Power here is committed to a labor plan that maximizes employment, not just for local residents, but actually workers who've made their living maintaining the existing coal units today, and who are facing potential loss of that employment as those coal units retire, through an innovative partnership with Lakehead Construction, which employs lots of laborers. So we have members who work in the coal plant today who would get their chance to work on this project. So we're really excited on decision options. We would say 1, 2, and 3. We noted just a little concern on the language on 4, that it's not just about panels or necessarily just government action. In other words, we think it's always the company's burden to prove up what the actual costs, but there's all sorts of factors that are affecting costs today in infrastructure construction, and I think we want to make sure that there's a fair opportunity to bring the relevant costs forward. We support similar to Minnesota Power 5 and 6 and 8 through 12.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pranis. And Dr. Lieb, or is it Andy Bond?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Sydney Lieb with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and I have Andy Bond and Mark Johnson online as technical experts for questions as well. The department is supportive of the project. We are in agreement that this is consistent with the resources that were ordered in the most recent Minnesota Power IRP, and we believe that the company used a commission-approved bidding process for these bids and for the selection process. We are excited about the project as it moves the company towards continued compliance with both the clean energy standard and the renewable energy standard in the state, and we recommend approval of these renewable resources from both a energy and capacity need and also a compliance with state energy policy. We have raised one concern with the project, which is that the interconnection costs and the transmission costs were not included in the bid. Typically, these costs are included in the full bid price, and because they're not included, the department was not able to analyze and compare and ensure that the company is achieving those at the least cost. And for that reason, we're recommending that the costs be capped at the bid price. And I think this is a larger overall concern, that if these things are not being included in the bids for RFPs, it sets a precedent that endangers the overall fairness of the RFP process and doesn't provide the necessary information for analysis and ratepayer protection. And given our overall thoughts and concerns on this docket, we're recommending decision options 1 through 5, 7, and 12.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll turn to commissioner questions, and Commissioner Hom.
Thank you. I didn't plan, but I need to ask Mr. Pranis some question because I heard very positive news that during the opening statement you mentioned that some of the potentially displaced coal power plant employee is working with you to transition into green job. So I really pay attention to those potential, and hopefully that's the trend. So is it first time you have seen that the potential displaced employees are willing to work with you to come into the green job?
And I want to clarify, so there's two kinds of coal plant, there's the direct employees of Minnesota Power who we don't represent, right? Those are represented by IBW. And then there's the construction maintenance workforce that's in there year in and year out doing the the cleaning and construction and maintenance you need to keep a coal plant going. And so many of those are currently our members. And so they're members who work in plants but this is the opportunity for them to sort of get a different set of skills or to put those same skills to work on a solar project. So we're expecting, especially because of who that workforce is up there, a lot of our members, and we have Patrick O'Connell here is one of our organizers from up there. A lot of our members who currently work in the plant for Lakehead or other contractors will be on this solar project, building out the solar, and then hopefully we continue that development as we both develop out that site and other sites that they could travel to use those skills. And certainly we're always open to sort of new, especially when there's a large project, bringing in additional new people. But I think the primary benefit for us is our members who currently work in the plant, on maintenance, would be able to work on this solar project.
Okay, thank you. To me, that's the big news, and then thank you for working on that.
And I apologize, Commissioner, Chair Seaman, Commissioner Hom. The other point is that Sherco Solar had, many of these same attributes, and we also have members who have worked for years in Sherco working on that project. So I think it's not unprecedented, but this would be the chance to do that in Cohasset.
Yeah, hopefully in the future, I think that information is very visible to people that I think green job can give chance for the potentially those people displaced will be working on the new green job. Thank you. So, company, I have a question on this Boswell connector. You mentioned that initially you evaluate overall value of your self-build option, including it, but somehow you didn't put it into your bid in the bid analysis by third party. Why company didn't put that number in the bid first place, even though you evaluate the possibility of your project value against other potential competition?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, thank you for the question. I think I have a two-part response for that. The first is that the company used identified best practices for bidding into the RFP, which is to, when you have a large, line or a line that needs to be built, you would typically assign the portion of the line that project will use to the bidding costs. And so Minnesota Power at that time followed that best practice. However, since that bid was submitted, Minnesota Power has received an increased amount of interconnection requests at the site, and therefore identified an opportunity to size the line to its full capacity to prepare that line for the future to potentially bring on other clean energy projects. So it wasn't that, the company, I think, never intended to build for just 85 megawatts because that wouldn't be prudent transmission planning to build the line at that level. But at the time wasn't certain that the full capacity size of the line would be needed.
Okay, thank you. Given that in the record, how company did apportion that part of that Boswell interconnector to be attributed to this project and then trying to recover that cost from the ratepayers? What is the proportion, and how did you decide that proportion?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I do have to be a little bit careful here because these numbers are trade secret. But
not the dollar amount, that's why I'm asking you percentage. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak to the wrong percentage, but I would say that the percentage was equal to 85 megawatts of that 950 megawatt capacity. So it was, a smaller percentage than the full capacity of the line.
Okay, so you have decided to allocate the cost based on total interconnection capability and portion of this 85 as a percent of that base. Okay, thank you. Is it in the record?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that is in the record.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll ask the department a few questions. I am a bit confused with the department's initial recommendation and the reply comments. Department has a serious concern about not including this amount in the overall bid, So in the initial comment, you didn't know that, so that's why you recommend approval of this project. But why are you still recommending approval of this project if you have that significant concern about not including it?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, we're recommending approval of the project. We believe the project is consistent with the energy and capacity needs that were identified and approved in the IRP, but we have a concern with, and the project came in, everything was complete in the application. Our concern is that the interconnection costs are typically included with the bids in RFPs, and that they were not included in this case. Therefore, we think that the appropriate way to deal with that is to penalize the company by not including those by setting the cost cap at the bid price, which is also what we typically do in other RFP selections.
So in department's view, including this cost will not change the ranking order of the outcome of the bidding process then?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I don't think we have the interconnection costs for the other projects.
Yeah, okay, so what do you mean the interconnection cost for the other project? You mean the PPA project?
Right, I think the other bids, we don't have those costs to compare to ensure that we're choosing the least cost project.
Yeah, my understanding is it's a all-in price. Typically PPA doesn't distinguish what portion of the cost will be in their bid. That's why sometimes that PPA is beneficial to the ratepayers because there is no risk for the ratepayers. If that PPA contract is well written, there is no risk to the ratepayers other than they must take that energy at the cost. So that's why I am wondering what is your final recommendation based on given the record?
Dr. Lee.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I'm going to let Andy Bond answer this one, as I think he's looked more closely at the details of the bid prices and comparisons.
Mr. Bond, welcome. Please state your name for the record and then proceed to answer Commissioner Hom's question, if you're able.
Hi, this is Andy Bond with the department. Good morning, commissioners. Yeah, I think, I mean, our position has been that it be capped. I mean, this isn't really different than we have in other cases that is capped at the bid price, and then I guess we were concerned about the reply comments that the authorization of these extra costs, and we see that as over and above the bid price, and so we were concerned that these costs, because they weren't part of the bid, potentially might not be least costs and might not be in the benefit of ratepayers. So that's our basic logic for our position.
Okay, thank you for your response. But my question was, given the record and departments, I don't know what sort of a data request you have sent to company, and any information given to you, are you recommending approval of this project, given that even if we include the Boswell connector cost into the levelized cost for the company's project, will it change the ranking order? I mean, to me, if it alters ranking order, it has a serious flaw. But if it doesn't have that possibility of changing ranking order, the company said it's not going to change the ranking order. That's why I'm asking department, have you done your work to see whether it will alter ranking order of this bid?
Chair, go ahead, Andy, and then I'm going to go ahead and clarify the concern.
We have not done that analysis and whether it would impact the ranking order. Our position that if it's authorizing them to be able to collect those extra costs, that it shouldn't be ratepayers should pick up those extra costs, and it should be the company. That was our position. But we did not do a comparison of ranking of what would be the result if.
Then how can you recommend the approval of this project not knowing whether it's going to alter ranking order or not?
Well, I guess we approved it, and like I said, just that it's capped that the cost be capped at the bid. That's the condition of the approval.
Okay. Have you done analysis or sent data requests to company to validate whether their levelized cost is properly calculated or not?
No, we didn't do that. We weren't aware of these extra costs until the reply comments came in. And then we filed outside in response outside the comment period.
Well,
basically,
if you have sent any data request prior to your initial comments asking, to me, that's a regulatory 101. We trust you, but we need to validate your numbers. So you haven't done that?
The interconnection costs. We thought that we would assume they were included in the bid.
No, I mean overall levelized cost, because company-owned build usually shift risk of this overall project from PPA holder, if company sign PPA, to the ratepayers by building by itself. So company has to mitigate that risk, and we have to evaluate risk premium, the price differential between company owns and PPA. That's a risk premium ratepayers are going to save if we pick company's project. Have you done that analysis?
We did not do that analysis.
Without doing any of those analysis, how can you recommend in initial comments saying that we should approve this project?
Perhaps that's an analysis that we should have done that we didn't.
Okay, I think I'm done for now.
Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I have some clarifying questions that I want to start with, and so I want to recognize that a lot of the information in this docket is trade secret, so this is going to sound a little funny for those who are not following along on the trade secret documents, but I'm going to be very careful. Minnesota Power, so Ms. Kuklinski. If the department and Ms. Kuklinski, if you can turn to page 11 of the briefing papers, there is table 2. And in the public version, all of the numbers are blacked out, so we won't talk about any of the specific numbers, but I do want to talk through the different line items that are enumerated in that table. So first is one solar array. Obviously, we know that the solar array costs were included in your bid. Is that correct? I'm just going to go through each one.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, that is correct.
Okay, and to Dr. Lieb, do you agree that is correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Number 2 is where I'm starting to get confused. So number 2 is the solar project specific interconnector costs. I feel like there's some inconsistency in the record, and I just want to pull these 2 different interconnection costs apart. We've got the solar specific, and then we've got this surplus. So for the solar specific, was the solar specific interconnector cost included in your original bid?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, it was.
Excellent. Okay, that is very clarifying for me. I am not, as I understand it, the department is suggesting we should not allow for recovery of those costs based on the record, and I don't understand why. Dr. Lieb, am I misreading this, and or could you explain why?
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge. The department understands that that was the cost for the entire line, not the 85 megawatt. And that's our concern, is that it shouldn't be the full capacity of the line. It should be the 85 megawatt associated with this solar project.
So item number 2, or row number 2, that dollar amount that we cannot say, that was in the bid, and are you just disputing the surplus? Is that what you're disputing at this point?
That's what we're disputing at this point.
Okay, so the number 2 we're good with, based on the department, Minnesota Power is asking for it. So then we get to the Boswell surplus interconnection, which is item number 4. Okay, so item number 4 is to add additional capacity to that line for future use. And as I understand it, Ms. Kuklinski, you are proposing that you would recover that through the renewable energy rider.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, the company has proposed that in this petition.
And would that mean that you would only use that interconnection for renewable energy resources at the site? That is a concern I'm thinking through.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, that's a valid concern, and it would be too soon for the company to know that. As I mentioned, the company has started to receive a number of interconnection requests, which prompted the company to petition for cost recovery for the full capacity of the line, but it is too soon to know exactly what resources might connect to it.
Okay, so I'm just going to put some thoughts out here and explain why I'm concerned about this. I think my main concern is, having worked on the inside of utility, what I know is that customers do look at their bill and they look at the costs of the different riders, and that is important to people who are paying close attention to their bill. And I really don't want costs that are not associated with renewable energy to be represented on customer bills as being associated with renewable energy. I think it is important for the public to really understand, you know, what is driving the different riders and costs on their bill. So that's one of my concerns. I will also say, though, that if we are making a major investment, a significant investment in this interconnection, I want to make sure that it is future-proof. So if we know we're going to be interconnecting to the line later, I think it does make sense to go ahead at the, you know, and be more efficient in that investment up front. However, I am wondering what you think, Ms. Kuklinski, about the idea of, and I obviously haven't discussed this with my fellow commissioners, but what you would think of about saving item number 4 for a transmission, for the transmission rider, for recovery through that process.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, I appreciate the question and the opportunity to respond to that. That was a question I asked our experts myself, and we could defer if we get too much into the weeds here to our transmission expert who's online. But the answer I received was that it may not qualify for the transmission rider because it's a very short line. With that said, I think the company totally recognizes the concern that you're raising, that if it's recovered through the RRR and it's connecting projects that aren't renewable, that is a problem. And the company sees an opportunity, sees this request as getting authorized for cost recovery for those costs to size the line right, but that we could kind of true up the costs that are associated with renewable resources in our annual RRR filing. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that the company would recover the full cost through that rider if it weren't renewables connected.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my initial questions. I don't know if
No, that was helpful. And I mean, Ms. Kuklinski, for line, as Commissioner Partridge helpfully stepped through the trade secret dollars contained in Table 2, what's the company's, why did you put the surplus interconnection costs into your overall cost recovery request now? I still don't totally understand why. Tell me again why you put those surplus interconnection costs in to your filing here now, and why the commission should approve cost recovery when we're not even sure what you're going to put on that line later. I can't wrap my head around it.
Chair Sieben, thank you for the question. I think from the company's perspective, there are benefits of getting current cost recovery that could save ratepayers potentially for things that might connect to that line that do qualify under the RRR. With that said, the company does understand that concern and wanted to show the commission that there is a need, since this is exempted from the CON process, that there is a need for this prudent future proofing of the line, and the company could recover those additional costs in a rate case if needed, if the clarity just isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to doing the overall project, but I just still don't understand why we would do it now when you don't need it to connect the Boswell solar project specifically. And I mean, you're just saying in the future we're going to need additional transmission capacity here out of Boswell, and we're not sure what type of resources we will use to needed, so we're going to throw some costs in and hope that the commission approves it now.
Chair Sieben, I do understand how that sounds. And I think from the company's perspective, because, for a transmission line, maybe you would normally go through a certificate of need process, but this is exempt from that process. And so the company wanted to put it in this filing to demonstrate need, essentially. So I think that's more the company's intent, is that we want to demonstrate that there is a need for, if we're going to build it once right, and that there's a benefit to ratepayers in the future for that. So I hope that helps clarify.
And yeah, I think it does. And I think maybe I'm not understanding like the overall big picture here either, but I mean, and to get back to Commissioner Ham's earlier point of the department's analysis, I'm wondering if for right now, Dr. Lieb, if we didn't approve recovery of just the line 4, the Boswell surplus interconnection for this project, it doesn't mean we couldn't do that additional transmission capacity that's needed at a different time, but we capped it without the cost included in line 4. Would that alleviate the department's concerns about, what Mr. Bond indicated earlier, and would that be a reasonable way, in your opinion, to move for the commission to move forward with cost recovery so that the project keeps moving ahead?
Yes, Chair Sieben, and thank you for the discussion to bear this out.
Okay, Commissioner Ham.
Thank you. I have one more question on this Boswell interconnector portion of it. So, can this project interconnect without this Boswell interconnector?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, it cannot.
Okay.
Oh.
So, that line is more of optimized size versus the right size. You can build on the size, smaller connection to meet only need for this one. But company's view, since we are building this line, we are doing a more optimized size of the transmission line to make sure that when we are building once, we make sure that it has option value for future interconnection. That's what you did.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that's correct.
Okay, so this is about, it's typically in our certificate of need process, we are not necessarily build the right size. Sometimes I think we approve optimized size because it's better value. For example, CAVX 2020, we had a double circuit ready lines because it's more optimized rather than right-sized. So it's the same concept here.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that's correct. And I might have said right-sized earlier, but I meant optimized.
No. So this is an optimized size. So without this line, you have to build certain line anyway to interconnect. And then price differential between that versus this size versus a future potential value for the ratepayers, your view, that value outweigh this additional cost.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that's correct. The company does believe that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Partridge, did you have another follow-up?
Ms. Kuklinski, can you explain to me once more the proposal you had about truing up the surplus costs at a later date to reflect the amount that is attributable to renewables? Can you talk me through that? Because I think Commissioner Hom makes a very good point. And you can think about the investments in your own home. If you're redoing your electrical panel, you leave a little extra room in case you get a different device that you want to add on later. And so it saves you a bunch of money later on. It sounds like you are already, as a company, aware of multiple requests to interconnect at that same site. We also, have invested a lot in this site. And as Mr. Pranis brought up, I think all of us, want to continue to invest in the Cohasset community and in the Boswell community, if you will, to make sure that we continue to use those resources because it is efficient and cost-effective and supports a community that has supported our energy system in northern Minnesota for decades and decades. So I personally don't want to right size and then go spend a bunch of extra money later to add more on. But like I said, I am just really sensitive that we put the costs in the right place. So if you could talk through this idea you had of how you could really ensure that at the end of the day, the costs associated with the surplus are reflected appropriately as either being part of a renewable energy investment or not.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, thank you for that question. So I will say I might get a little over my skis here because I'm not our rider expert necessarily, but it's my understanding that, and I think the company's position is that the company has to request rider cost recovery annually before, we submit our actual rider petitions. And so it's the company's position that, if for some reason there is something that is connecting to that, we could attribute, portions of the cost of optimizing the line to the portion of resources that are renewable or like battery storage or something like that through the rider process. And so that would come before the commission every year for the commission to be able to take a look, and the Department of Commerce could take a look at that as well. And that would be a way of allocating the costs appropriately for the RRR.
Okay. And one more follow-up. And then similarly, if for some reason the interconnections that you anticipate do not come to fruition and that line is ultimately not used and useful, or the surplus is not used and useful, we would be able to, and this isn't really a question, but we would be able to decide at that point to not allow for cost recovery through the rider process. So we still have, my point is, a bite at the apple to say, hey, you know, we said green light on this because you are willing to take on the risk that this will be a used and useful asset, and you are willing to take on that risk for the benefit of making sure that we are doing this in an efficient and lower cost way. And so I'm starting to come around, I think, to this approach, just to put that thought out there in the universe for my fellow commissioners. So thank you for talking me through that. I guess, if I may, Chair Steben, Dr. Lieb, do you have any concerns after hearing my thinking out loud?
Thank you, Chair Steben. Commissioner Partridge, I think the department would like to see the surplus in the transmission rider, which I think is what the company is agreeing to, rather than in the renewable rider, partly for optics, and also we appreciate the company's discussion here about right size versus size optimized, considering the other things that are going to interconnect. But we note that that discussion is not in the docket, and really should have been how they replied to the department's concerns about the surplus being included in the cost here. And I think if it's put into the transmission rider, they have an opportunity to flesh that out, discuss why they think they need this amount of surplus, and we can have a robust record to develop there to make sure we're getting the optimal size on the line.
Okay. Chair Steben, my understanding, Dr. Lieb, is that the company isn't sure that this line would be eligible for cost recovery through the transmission rider. Do you feel that it would be eligible?
The department believes that it is fine that it is eligible in the transmission rider.
Okay. And so, building on that, the process we just talked through a little bit here with Ms. Kuklinski is that we would go ahead and approve it through the res rider, the renewable rider, and we have a little bit of room to approve ancillary costs, but they need to be associated specifically with renewable energy resources. And then Ms. Kuklinski is saying then when Minnesota Power comes to us again and says, you know, here's the costs we want to include and we need you to approve this rider, then they could say, actually, X dollars or a portion of this is actually going to interconnect a non-renewable resource, so therefore we're going to move it into the transmission rider. Is that what we were discussing, Ms. Kuklinski?
Chair Steben, Commissioner Partridge, I'm getting a phone a friend information, but I think the company's understanding is that a certificate of need would be required for this project in order to roll those costs into the transmission rider. The company wouldn't be opposed to approaching it the way you've suggested, where if there are additional costs, it would go into the rider. We're just not sure if that is allowed by statute.
Thank you, Ms. Kuklinski, and you may be right, because I'm just trying to think creatively about a path forward so that we're allocating those expenses appropriately.
And Dr. Kuklinski, is the size of the Boswell surplus interconnection line going to be determined, or the overall cost for Boswell surplus transmission going to be determined based on what resources the Commission and Minnesota Power propose to go onto the line? Or is it entirely dependent on the interconnection to Boswell itself? You know what I mean? Like, because some of the thing in my head that I keep thinking is like, we haven't made the selection yet for what will interconnect. And so does that determine the overall cost of the Boswell surplus interconnection transmission line? Because if it does, then I think it's best to like figure out an alternative path for the overall, decision about this portion that would be allocated to Boswell Solar.
Chair Sieben, thank you for the question. So the company intends to build the line to optimize it regardless. So I think if there were resources that, I'm certain that if resources were going to be connecting to it, those would be brought forward in a similar way that these petitions have that are before you today. And so the commission would still be, potentially approving or would be approving potential resources that would be connected to the line. But as kind of a point of clarity, since we're not certain that any of these costs could flow into the transmission rider, the company does understand that we could recover them through a rate case if they were, say, denied through the RRR.
Stephen, and Ms. Kuklinski, how do you envision that happening? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. If the commission today said we're approving based on table 2, 1 and 2, then you would bring costs associated with number 4, which is the surplus interconnection, through a rate case? Or are you saying if we approve all of it, 1 through 4, through the RRR, then if there's any portion that is not associated with renewable energy resources, you would then bring it through a rate case? Which of those?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, I think Minnesota Power would prefer the second option that you stated, only because there are benefits associated with certain cost recovery for customers, but we could do either.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And Dr. Lieb, do you have any final recommendations or thoughts on what the discussion and what you think is a best path forward for the commission?
The department still recommends that we approve the costs associated with the 85 megawatt apportionment and move the surplus costs into the transmission cost recovery rider, or some other space, if you want to think creatively about it, where we can make sure that we're optimizing what those additional costs are. I think the concern is that to approve the surplus costs without full record development on what else is interconnecting into that line and what the optimized surplus transmission investment is inconsistent with how we generally feel the record should be developed on these types of investments. And I think that's where we're at.
And Dr. Kuklinski, I don't know if your independent evaluator is here or not, but based on the discussion we just had, and I think what I heard in your opening comments and what were in the petition, the company still firmly stands behind that this project is overall least cost or almost least cost proposal for Minnesota Power. And even if we, and there was, the independent evaluator helped do like a apples to apples comparison of the total project costs amongst the different projects that were bid in. Is that correct?
Chair Sieben, that's correct. The independent evaluator is online. It's Jessica Gronendahl, but does have to sign off soon for an 11 o'clock meeting. So if you wanted to ask her questions, she is available for a few more minutes. With that said, the company believes, based on the company's analysis, it would still be the lowest cost project, but we'd have to actually go back in and fully do the analysis with the independent evaluator to determine whether it's slightly above or below the Regal project that you'll be hearing about next. But it would certainly still be significantly lower than the next project that was not selected.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if other commissioners want to hear from the independent evaluator specifically. I think we're kind of past that overall, but okay. Should we take a break, commissioners, or Commissioner Hom, did you have any other questions or an idea of what you're comfortable, what you're thinking? Or we can just, Commissioner Partridge could make a motion and then we could see if we agree and take a break, or I don't know what you want to do. Friends.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that there is some concern with the validation process, but that's already done. I think we have to improve for the next one. Given that, I think there is only a valid record is from the company and then third-party evaluator. So yeah, I have some suggestion to do certain follow-ups, but I think that doesn't have nothing to do with the financial recovery side of it.
Okay. Commissioner Partridge.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sieben. And I want to echo and reiterate what Commissioner Hom said, that when this came to us, when we started reviewing the record, in the record, the department states that this was an improper bidding process. And to say that this was an improper bidding process and yet to recommend approval and just cut some costs off, that doesn't make any sense. That is illogical. If it's an improper bidding process, then you need to do something to dig to the bottom and come to a conclusion about what would have been proper had it been done right. And so that's my frustration, is that if you say something that incendiary, you need to have done a lot more work. So please don't say things like that if you are not prepared to back it up with a lot of information and data going forward. And then otherwise, I'm very pleased with this project. I want to say thank you to Minnesota Power for working to find a way to continue to invest in the Boswell site and in the community and in that region. And I think this was excellent. It is supported by the city of Cohasset. It is supported by labor. And it is bringing on a significant amount of solar. So I'm very happy about it. I can make a motion. I think if we're ready for it. All right, I would move 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I will maybe ask staff while we take a break to let me know if you feel that we need any additional language in here to codify the conversation we had around attributing the costs of the surplus interconnection through the rider at a later date, or if you feel like that is included in the normal process.
Yeah, maybe we will take a break and talk about that too, because I still think at this time, until we're sure about the overall cost of just that surplus interconnection portion of the transmission costs, that we don't need to approve those costs included in the cap now, that it could come through a different system, either through a rate case, as Minnesota Power indicated, or through a different rider. So I just want to make sure that I don't know if you support that, Commissioner Partridge or Commissioner Hom, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Based on the conversation, would be a prudent thing to do for us now. Still move forward with the project, but just have another process for the overall cost attributable to this on just the interconnection surplus.
One question I have for you, Chair Sieben, is just would the cap, I'd like to I think it's nice that we could lock the cap on 1 through 4, referring to Table 2, for that surplus portion as well. And so maybe we can do that.
I
on the
mean,
back.
reduce the cap to take out the interconnection costs?
No, to just
then-
say, yeah, you're going to make that investment, but you can't go over this estimate that you've got in here today that I can't say.
And I was thinking about it, of taking out those interconnection surplus costs out of this petition,
Right.
which I think maybe I'm just not articulating it well. And then they would seek recovery of those costs for the Boswell surplus interconnection in a different filing.
Right. And my question is just, then we can't cap, or my statement is, then we can't cap it until the later date, is my understanding. Like, we can cap it here by approving it here, and then they have this option, number 5, to come forward and say, you know, a tariff went into place or some, you know, a government action caused the price to go up, and they could, you know, ask for additional cost recovery. But if we say kick it out, then I think the cap would kind of restart, and I think it'd be nice to have that protection right now.
Yeah, I think, let's take a break, and
Sure.
then we can each individually talk to staff to confirm that we're understanding the way that your decision options would work. And then we'll come back. So the commission stands in recess for 10 minutes. Oh, sorry, I jumped the online. Are we good, Mary? Okay, the commission will come back from its recess. And Dr. Kuklinski, sorry to backtrack here, but a couple questions that I just need a little help with. Are the costs of your Boswell, or not the Boswell, the interconnection, the surplus interconnection transmission line included in your IRP that you just filed?
Chair Sieben, thanks for the question. I'm just going to look back at my colleague quick. We'll bring Eric Palmer up to the room, or up to the table.
Welcome, Mr. Palmer. Please state your name for the record.
Sure. Eric Palmer with Minnesota Power. So the project is included in our IRP, and for the costs we included align with what we put in the petition, so the cost directly allocated to the facility. So the Boswell interconnection costs would not directly be in the IRP, but we, as part of the IRP, it's integrated, so you have the whole transmission plan in there, and I don't know if these costs are as part of our transmission plan.
Okay, what if I asked it this way? If in your IRP you propose to use a significant portion of the interconnection for the gas plant that was attributable to the Boswell coal facility now, and if the commission approves that gas plant, will the costs or will the overall size or scope of the interconnection project shrink or expand based on that proposal? Because in my mind, I'm thinking the interconnection costs will be less if it's connected to a gas plant, one gas plant, as opposed to a much more widely dispersed renewable portfolio if the gas plant is not approved.
Chair Sieben, you're thinking about it correctly. So if we utilize this transmission line in the future for additional generation, if it's gas, wind, solar, batteries, whatever it is, those costs would be taken and considered as already like sunk. The customers have already paid for it. So it would reduce the cost of those projects going forward.
And as it relates to this Boswell solar interconnection costs, you estimated the proportional share for Boswell solar and are saying it's reasonable to include them now because those surplus interconnection costs are roughly going to be the same regardless of whether you build or the company eventually builds a gas plant or a bunch of other projects instead. Because I think what I'm struggling with is it could change the overall scope of the interconnection transmission costs depending on the resources that are selected.
Chair Sieben, I appreciate that question. I think we might have caused some confusion with what we're calling the line, but it's not the interconnection costs that we've proposed in the petition. It's the cost of building the line to that optimized capacity. So to answer your question, it would be the same regardless of the resource that was connected, like the actual cost of that line, the interconnector line.
The line will be the same cost overall, regardless of whether the commission ultimately selects the gas plant or different facilities that will hook up to it.
Chair Sieben, that's correct.
Okay, well then in that case, then I'm more comfortable moving forward with the proposal that Commissioner Partridge said earlier then, and I don't know if Commissioner Hom, if you have thoughts you wanted to share, but.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I'm okay too. Okay, it's optimized, and this is a BOT4 project. This is needed for the interconnection, so that's why I don't have a concern in overall. However, I have a concern with the overall bidding process and its evaluation process. Particularly, a lot of risk is shifted to the ratepayers. So we have to watch out how Minnesota Power is mitigating, managing that risk. Particularly, one thing is capacity factor. Capacity factor plays a significant role in the levelized cost of energy calculation and the life of the asset. Company use 35 as a life of asset, but I think, I don't know whether it's true or not, but based on my research, I think typically it's 25 to 30, and even it can be shorter if the technology advances quickly on this solar panel. Given overall situation, I think ongoing basis, we need to monitor capacity factor of this power plant to making sure that that bidding process was right. And another thing is, on the contrary to people's typical belief, solar panel doesn't do very well in the wintertime, but when sun is shining in the wintertime, actually it does better because there's no heat associated with it. Solar panel degrade its function during the summertime because of temperature. So I think we have seen that the MISO-wide performance of the solar during this winter, it was really good when sun is shining. That means company has to maintain this solar farm properly. For example, if there is a snow, you need to send somebody to clean that up quicker. Because typically after the snow, and typically in our area, we have a very sunny, shining day. To fully use that value, I think company is cognizant about maintaining this power plant. If it was a PPA, I don't have to worry about it because if they don't produce energy, ratepayer doesn't pay. But in this case, regardless of we are producing energy from this power plant or not, ratepayer has to pay for it. So hopefully, company is very mindful about maintaining this unit to keep your promise that it is a good value to the ratepayers. I have seen you guys during another proceeding in the public meeting. I saw that a lot of people trust in your company. I hope you keep maintaining that trust by doing a good job maintaining this unit, given that I have no concern with this motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did confer with staff over the break that it could be helpful to add an additional decision option to just codify the true-up to ensure that they are bringing forth a true-up in the renewable rider filings. Mr. Davis, do you have that available? So I'd like to make a friendly amendment to my own motion for you to consider. Okay, thank you so much.
So that says approve. I think we just need to tweak the language a little bit. Wait, approve recovery of both item 2 of table 2?
Yeah, both item 2 of table 2 and item 4, there may need to be a little language finessing, but essentially it says we're approving recovery of,
The costs
yeah, of,
associated with.
let's see, let me pull this. The costs of the solar transmission interconnection and the Boswell surplus interconnection. And then in any subsequent rider filing, the company will true up the amounts or the amount of the Boswell surplus interconnection based on the allocation of renewables to non-renewables. And then just a clarifying statement at the end to say, you all will, in your next rate case, bring forward, you know, a final true up there, and then we will stop having to redo the allocation. Dr. Kuklinski, and I very much apologize for not calling you Dr. Kuklinski. It just left my brain, so I apologize. You got a note, I think.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Partridge, first of all, thank you. It's no problem at all. And second, I think the company would just like to clarify in that final sentence there that the true-up would continue until the project is in service. The in-service date, you know, we don't know when the next rate case date would be, but that would be the only clarifier.
It's fine.
And Dr. Lieb, are you comfortable with a modified decision, option 6 language?
The department still feels that the surplus interconnection costs are they're not tied to, we don't know what's interconnecting. It's not tied to anything that's been analyzed. It's a large investment and we have concerns about approving it now and setting ourselves up if we feel it's imprudent later to have to deny it, which is a pretty high bar. But if the commission and the other stakeholders feel this is the best option.
I think one thing that tipped me on it, Dr. Lieb, just to, because I was with you before I wasn't, was that it's only the proportional share here. And so it's not going to end up being like a significant amount of difference, even though we can't say the amount. And as Dr. Kuklinski and Mr. Palmer said, like the overall costs of the Boswell interconnector line are not going to vary significantly based on the types of resources that connect to it. So I think I'm okay doing this proportional recovery piece right now because it is proportional to the overall cost of the project.
Chair Stephen, I think we can support that. I think we'll be really carefully following what's in the true up and ensuring that we're not bringing on something like merchant gas plants and things like that being paid for through here.
I appreciate that. Okay, Commissioner Partridge renews her overall motion. Is the motion clear to Mr. Davis and commissioners? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. Thank you, everyone. Now you can stay in your seats for item number 2. Mr. Warbola, please introduce it for us.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, item number 2 is docket number E015M24343 in the matter of the petition Minnesota Power for approval of investments and expenditures in the Regal solar project for recovery through Minnesota Power's Renewable Resource Rider under Minnesota Statute 216B-1645. The question before the Commission is, should the Commission approve Minnesota Power's recovery of investments and expenditures in the Regal solar project through the Renewable Resources Rider? Staff, no additional comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we didn't need opening comments. Commissioners, did you want to start with questions? One, and I know we're trying to move along here, one question for Minnesota Power is if you could articulate for this project and the last one, the benefits of the production tax credits and the ratepayer savings to customers. Our next discussion item is about, talking more about the benefits of the PTCs and the ITCs on ratepayers. And when I was reading this docket, it really became clear how important that is. So I know it's not like centrally on the purpose of what we're doing here today, Dr. Kuklinski, but if you have anything you want to add just to help educate the public about the importance of that federal tax policy to keeping this project affordable to ratepayers, I would appreciate it.
Chair Sieben, of course, thank you for the question. So I would say that the amount of benefits that are associated with the project depends on, the size of the project and how much energy it would produce. In this case, or in the case of both of the projects before the commission today, the company intends to use production tax credits, which do save customers a significant amount, as noted in the filing. I could give an average statement that the company has determined that with IRA's renewable tax credits, the company and ratepayers save about $20 a megawatt hour for solar projects with the way that the company uses PTCs today. So if that benefit were to go away, it would be about $20 a megawatt more. So that's kind of our general analysis. I'll also just mention, and I know we're on to the next item, but for the previous docket for the Boswell Solar Project, that project also qualifies for a transition community tax credit, which brings that to 110% of PTCs available. So that there's an additional benefit when projects are located in host communities or transitioning communities, as in the case of Boswell.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Dr. Lieb, for the department, is there anything you wanted to add on this docket? It seems like it's pretty straightforward and there's broad support.
Chair Sieben, I think we would characterize it also as straightforward with broad support.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Hom, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Based on the prior discussion, I think I move decision option 1 through 10.
Great. Is there any discussion? And hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the motion prevails. Great. Thank you, everyone. We will take a short break and we'll come back at, how about 11:45 to take up the final discussion item. Commission stands in recess until 11:45. Which mic works best, Mary? Which one should they not sit at? Which mic? Or there? Oh. They all work pretty well. Today. I know. Okay, we'll come back from our recess, and I see, first of all, that Commissioner Sullivan has joined us from the airport. Thank you, Commissioner. Well, maybe I shouldn't say where you are, but you were working anyway.
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, thank you. I know he was there for a MISO meeting, so thank you for doing two things at once. And Mr. Harsh, will you please introduce item number 3?
Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item number 3 is a discussion item focused on docket number EG 999/CI-22-624 in the matter of a joint investigation into the impacts of the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. Ahead of this agenda meeting, the Commission asked parties to first quantify, to the extent possible, the current long-term financial impacts of the IRA on ratepayers. This should include, but is not limited to, the effects of related investment tax credits and production tax credits. In their responses, parties were asked to describe how these impacts differ from the projections made at the time the Act was enacted. Second, to describe known changes to federal energy sector grant funding to Minnesota since the end of 2024. Amanda Rome from Xcel Energy, Beth Soholt from the Clean Grid Alliance, and Pete Wyckoff from the Department of Commerce are prepared to speak on these issues. Staff was also made aware that representatives from Minnesota Power and CenterPoint Energy are available to answer questions but have not prepared remarks. Staff has no further remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harsh. And as Mr. Harsh said, this is a discussion item that there's an open docket from already, and we thought it was important to hear from parties on updates to the not only the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, but also to help highlight to the public and to anyone else who is listening and interested in emphasizing the beneficial impacts that the IRA has had already on helping keep rates affordable. So we're really pleased to have 3 speakers here today to speak to the effects. And Ms. Rome, your name was announced first, so we'll turn it to you first, I think. Thank you so much for being here. Please introduce yourself for the record, and welcome. We haven't seen you in person in a while, so it's nice to see you back in front of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. Amanda Rome, Xcel Energy. Yeah, and it was like coming home as I was driving here. It was so it's great to be back, and I really want to thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for convening this meeting. It is a really important topic, and the forum for discussion and kind of the foresight shown here to raise it is, we're grateful for it. I maybe just will start, and we have a couple slides to get directly to the questions that you have raised, but maybe I'll just start by saying that the preservation of the technology neutral and the nuclear tax credits is maybe the very top priority we have now as at Xcel Energy from a federal policy standpoint, so much so that our CEO probably spends 2 weeks a month in Washington, D.C. meeting with lawmakers, policymakers, the administration, and really hammering the importance of these tax credits to our customers and our communities. Specifically, our message to D.C. has been that these PTCs provided by the IRA really have provided an opportunity to build needed generation we absolutely need for our systems, and to do so in a way that stimulates the local economy and does it at a cost that is as low as possible it can be for our customers. So, and the customer affordability impact, Chair, that you asked about directly is significant. So I'll give you one marker before we put up the slides. But since 2018, our investments have saved our customers $5 billion. That's avoided costs and production tax credits. We'll focus on production tax credits when we put up the slide. And this year, our upper Midwest customers, which is primarily Minnesota customers, will see an additional benefit of $250 million from the nuclear tax credits. So to put some numbers on these are significant benefits to the customers. So if I may, we can go to the first slide, the one after this, this cover slide, because I think it's useful to sort of see existing resources, what this commission has approved as far as future resources, and you can see there that's pending in the pending IRP settlement, and then you have what's in the generic resources of the Upper Midwest Resource Plan. As we think about this, and you can see right on the top there, we're talking about $12 billion in future tax credits that we are really seeking to preserve on behalf of our customers. Of course, customers receive 100% of these tax credits. They flow through. And if you start to the left of this slide and work to the right, just to give the commission a perspective on how we think about possible outcomes here. We feel really good on what's on the left part of this slide, existing resources. It's always a challenge to prognosticate, but we think it's pretty unlikely and difficult for action to be taken retroactively on projects that are already in service or generating credits. When you get to the middle and right of the slide, that's where there is more risk associated with a drawdown of the credits. There's a full repeal outcome that we don't think, sort of an immediate full repeal that we don't think is the most likely outcome. And a more likely outcome is a capping or a phasing down of the tax credits, both on how long they're available, but then also the percentage going from, 100 to 80 to 60. Those of us who have been in the business for a while might remember this cycle that used to happen, that you would get sort of to the end of the safe harboring period, then they would extend those credits. So that's the sort of likely outcome that we're tracking here, that maybe that's where policymakers are possibly landing. Now, why do we think a full immediate repeal is unlikely? These projects are beneficial to states that are all along the energy policy spectrum. Think of it as blue states, red states, purple states, however you want to think about it. So much so that, there have been letters, I think it was 21 Republican representatives from the House Republicans wrote the committee chair a letter advocating for preservation of these credits. On the federal Senate side, 4 Republican senators sent a similar letter saying, let's be really thoughtful about these credits because they're really meaningful to utility bills, to our customers, and to the local communities. So happy to pause here. We could do opening remarks. I can hit the DOE grant piece of it too, but that's maybe at the highest level, responding to that first question of what is the value of these credits and what are some likely outcomes we're tracking at the federal level.
Commissioners, did you have questions for Ms. Rome before we move on? And what is your preference? Should we move to Ms. Solholt then, or did you want to keep going and finish?
Chair, whatever is useful for you, because the next slide is about the grants. So if you want to switch to that, we can. Otherwise, I am very happy to wait topic-wise.
Why don't you keep going, and then we'll hear, because we didn't really give I didn't give a lot of direction to the presenters about how to structure your presentation, so that's kind of my fault. Commissioner Sullivan.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Chair Stephen. Thank you, Ms. Rome, for being here today. I'm just curious, in terms of, have you heard when it is likely Congress will act on this? Or act on whatever they end up doing? Do you have a timeline, or have you heard? I know I would never hold you to it, but I'm just wondering what you're hearing through your channels.
Chair Steven, Commissioner Sullivan, thank you for the question. I don't have a reliable timeline for you. You might have seen that there was a House bill that former Commissioner Fedoracek, now Representative Fedoracek, has put forward. So, I expect those will be heard in committees in the near term. But I do not have a reliable timeline on when we're likely to see outcomes here. There's a lot of conversations happening.
And Ms. Rome, in terms of $12 billion in future IRA tax credit, what's the time frame? Like for how many years is that? Or would that be annually, or is that over the 10 years? Or
yeah, that's over the course of, it's 5 years is what the furthest right column represents. The generic resources approved in the 5-year Upper Midwest IRP plan. So it's, you have the backward-looking existing resources, but then the middle column to the right, it appears to be a 5-year window.
And then another question, which might be hard to quantify off the top of your head, is the ratepayer impact of an average residential household. It's hard to probably, and maybe that's something we'll ask all of the utilities to try to estimate is, system-wide, we know the billions of dollars of impact, but we would like to know, I think, eventually, too, what it means for average residential rates, if possible.
Chair Seaman, I'm not sure I have that at my fingertips. I think when we were talking a per project basis, you asked Minnesota Power and they gave you about a 30% number. That felt about right as I was listening to that, but I can see even in the interim here if we can get you an approximate number there.
And Commissioner Partridge.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. What I might, there we go. Sorry, that turned off on me. What I might want to do is ask that all the utilities file an estimate, just thinking, worst case scenario, if the tax credits were to go away, what that impact would be on ratepayers, because I think it would be helpful for all customers, to have that and for us to have that in mind as we are kind of watching things play out.
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Partridge, thank you. I am getting a message that we would rough it out at $3.75 a month increase for a full repeal. Just to frame it a bit.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, Ms. Solholt, welcome to the commission, and if you wanted to provide remarks, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair Steven and Commissioners. Beth Solholt with Clean Grid Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to make some comments today. I did not provide formal slides, but I'm glad to provide the materials that I did review. First of all, there's a lot of numbers, and so context matters for each utility and for Minnesota and for kind of the couple of studies that I did look at. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about, there are two reports, one done by Brattle and one done by ICF. For either groups of trade associations that are working this issue on Capitol Hill in DC, or for right of center NGO groups who are working to preserve the tax credits and in the conversation on Capitol Hill. So Brattle and ICF, they both come up with the same kinds of trends and concepts and rough numbers. But the overall message is that the IRA, the tax credits for renewable energy and the other ones that Excel, Ms. Rowan talked about have been hugely beneficial to nationwide, but certainly to Minnesota with our goals and requirements. We have growing load that Minnesota and the nation are looking to meet. We have economic growth that we need to see happen. We have job creation. We have advanced manufacturing and reshoring that we're trying to accommodate. And the tax credits really have been able to incentivize the type of energy development that I believe the nation needs to have in the next decade plus. And so just let me talk about what the Brattle report showed. They looked at an expansion of electricity usage by 50% and peak demand by 30% over the next decade. So large growth. And, that will require development of an array of resources with different development timelines. We can talk a little bit about, what resources are ready to go. But I think really, if you just look at what would happen if there was a full repeal of the IRA tax credits, it would be about annual generation costs nationwide would be about 14% higher by 2035. And so they also have a range. I know Ms. Rowan gave you a range per month for the average ratepayer, but it's somewhere in the $80 to $150 range per year by 2035 for customers. It sounds like it's a little bit less than that for Minnesota utilities, but it is a significant impact, and would have the potential to reduce GDP because more money spent on electricity would crowd out the ability to afford other expenditures by ratepayers. So I wanted to also talk a minute about just what are the benefits that the IRA has produced. And I have a fact sheet from American Clean Power that actually is Minnesota specific. And if you look at their fact sheet, the headline is American Energy Grows the Economy. And the headline for Minnesota really is clean energy investment is estimated to add $50 billion to the state's economy from 2025 to 2035. And this is really in a number of sectors. So it's transportation, power, buildings, sustainable aviation fuel, and manufacturing. So it's a variety, but the point really is the IRA has boosted Minnesota's economy by $109 billion. And that's spending resulting from investments in those 5 or 6 sectors that I talked about. And they break this down based on, the ICF report that I talked about. But any way you slice or dice it, Minnesota's winning, the nation's economy and jobs and families are winning. This is smart tax policy, and I know, as Ms. Rowan stated, there are numerous conversations going on in Capitol Hill to show the benefits that have accrued and why we need to continue this tax policy. So I can go more in depth on a lot of these topic areas, but maybe I'll just leave it there for the moment and see what kinds of questions come up. Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Happy to answer any right now, Chair Stephen.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Thank you, Ms. Soholt. I have, I appreciate the information you just shared with us. I'm going to take this not in a different direction, but in a similar spot. I'm obviously worried about the IRA going away or being substantially changed, and I think there would be a pretty significant, it's established there'd be a very significant impact to Minnesotans on that. Quite frankly, I'm more concerned about the impact of tariffs and the impact of that on supply chains for wind and solar, steel and everything. And I'm wondering if either you or Ms. Rome would be willing to speak to what you know about what's going on, what you're seeing right now on that front.
Sure. Chair Stephen and Commissioner Sullivan, glad to talk about that. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now with the IRA discussions, with the tariffs. Renewable energy development, like lots of other businesses, doesn't like uncertainty. They like regulatory certainty, economic certainty, being able to know they're going to be able to finance projects. So I think we are generally seeing developers tighten their belts. We've seen a bit of staff reduction. we're seeing some consolidation. I don't think we've seen a total shakeout yet. If things continue for quite a while, or there are significant tariffs and increased costs that get passed forward or linger. I'm not sure we've had any formal look at what the tariff implications may be, from a cost per project, but we've seen on solar panels from China, for instance, 3,500% tariff. I mean, there are lots of different ranges, but certainly significant increased costs. On the wind side, and then, the tariffs that the Trump administration has put on solar and the other duties and things that have come forward too. On the wind side, it's a little bit different story. We have more domestic manufacturing of wind components than we do solar panels. And so there are 8,000 components in a wind turbine. We've done a lot to have tool and die shops and others be able to supply component parts because we've had a longer runway for wind than for solar. But I am certain developers will try to do everything they can to be prudent about cost because they know there's a point at which they're not competitive. But I think overall, when you still look at the challenges that whether it's renewable energy or storage or even gas is having today with getting gas turbines and transmission lines, how much more expensive are they going to be with, the cost? I think there's an impact to all of those sectors.
Have you seen an impact on the price of steel? Has that been brought up in any conversations that you're a part of? Anything that you could share with us?
I don't have anything specific yet. It takes a little while to trickle down to know what those impacts are. Perhaps one of the other speakers might have information.
That's fine.
Ms. Soholt, on the issue of Clean Grid represents a lot of developers, and so I should know this, but if there's a PPA, for example, and the commission ultimately approves the PPA, a utility acquires a set amount of a project that's a PPA, then if the production tax credits go away, who sees the loss of that production tax credit value? The developer in that case? Or walk me through that, I should know, but...
Yeah. Well, I would guess that there's a provision in the PPA for sharing that risk or for handling that situation. We've had lots of different situations come up over the years of things that either were accounted for in the PPA or were not anticipated, and the parties have had to figure out how to parse out those costs. Maybe Ms. Roan could speak. Could speak to that too, what they do. But I'm guessing there is a provision, and it's likely a negotiation about who bears those additional costs. I think in the Excel IRP that was pretty recently concluded as part of their last IRP, the 5-year plan, and the RFP that went forward, I think there were quite a few provisions that fell to the developer. And so I'm just as curious as you are, Chair Stephen, about who bears that responsibility. But my guess is it's handled in the PPA, that it's either spelled out that it's, reopens the price and it's negotiation then about how it gets split out or who bears that cost, or it is specific in the PPA. I would ask Excel Energy to see if they could elaborate.
Ms. Rome, on the issue of PPAs, I'm curious how it will work if the ITCs or PTCs are repealed.
Thank you, Chair. obviously very different. We flow our PTCs directly to customers. For the developer, that's part of their hurdle rate as they think about, is this a profitable project or not? My expectation is there is a provision that says if there's a change in law, there might be some ability to reopen. What we will see now, though, is people negotiate specific provisions around tariffs. And what we are currently seeing is projects pull out. So you have an RFP, you have developers who've put in a bid and now see so much risk associated. In Colorado, we have a model PPA, right? So you have terms that are set in stone. It's a part of what the commission there approves. So that risk is on them in Colorado, other than if there's a change in law and they can argue for a reopener there. So we are seeing certain developers step away because they don't want to be held to that contractual number because they bear the risk.
Because of the tariffs in that case, or because of the tax
tariffs
credits.
Or tax credits, depending.
Yeah, and so in Minnesota, if you have a existing PPA right now, not forward looking for like was approved in the IRP, but an existing PPA, there may be contract provisions that would allow the developer to go to Excel and say there's been a major change in tax policy, and so we need to recover. Our overall cost of energy has increased, and so now Excel is essentially passing those costs. We're losing the benefits as ratepayers, and the loss of the tax credits would be felt by the ratepayers.
Chair, yeah, because what you might see is the developer's not going to move forward with the project because they start to bear that risk. Maybe contractually they would have to bear it, but what you're going to see is an attempt to reopen. And if you're
even existing PPAs, it depends on if it's a full repeal or not. I understand.
Yes.
But it could create significant financial harm, not only to the existing developers or existing wind contracts you have, for example, but also to future ones, certainly. Correct. Ms. Soholt, does that sound like am I on the right track here?
Yeah. Chair Steven, Commissioners, I think it's more likely that it is a future risk than a past. I'm sure my members would not want me to say anything that precludes them from being able to reopen something if they needed to. But my sense is the riskier part is the future. How to hold price when there's all this uncertainty. As you know, as many of us know, there are multiple uncertainties going on. Interconnection, waiting for transmission, upgrade costs, financing, equipment, rising cost of equipment or availability. All those add to higher costs in projects. And so it's hard to be a developer right now with all the uncertainty. Risk management is a 24/7 job right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. Are there other questions, or should we pull Dr. Wyckoff in the department? Dr. Wyckoff, you were certainly instrumental in helping pass provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, and so would welcome your thoughts into how the conversation that's already unfolded and how it will impact existing projects versus new projects as well, or whatever you're ready to do.
Thank you, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. I'm Pete Wyckoff, Deputy Commissioner for Energy, the Department of Commerce. I'm pleased to be here with you today, and I think my remarks will piggyback on some of the things we've already heard. Also, congratulations to Commissioners Hom and Partridge on your confirmation yesterday by the Minnesota Senate. So it is good to see that. Next slide, please. The current administration in Washington has vowed to lower energy prices, but policy choices and threatened moves have thus far pushed strongly in the other direction, raising the real possibility of substantial energy price inflation. This docket is focused on the IRA, so I will focus most of my comments there, talking mostly about the importance of clean energy tax credits, which we've already started to hear. The tax credits contained in the IRA are the heart and soul of that bill, and crucial for moving us to a clean, low-cost, reliable electric system. As we move to a period of increasing electric demand, the tax credits are primed to help us rapidly increase energy supply with a focus on homegrown energy that doesn't come with fuel cost. A key part of what I would consider to be energy dominance, if you will. The credits seem likely threatened by the need to find pay-fors for the budget reconciliation bill currently under development in Congress. A full or partial repeal would be a mistake, and as I think we'll show, lead to unavoidable electric sector rate increases. I also want to talk briefly, and I don't have to do it all at once, about our ongoing concerns about IRA and IIJA grant funding for the electric sector, including some good news. And maybe before finishing with a thought about recent federal executive orders that seem to be attempting to meddle with state policy. What I won't talk about are tariffs, but the current administration is pursuing a trade policy that will be substantially inflationary in the energy space. The problem is particularly acute in Minnesota, particularly with our dependencies on Canadian imports. Like everywhere, our energy system infrastructure depends on complicated supply chains that are highly exposed to disruption in global trade. This is something that the IRA was designed to help rectify by encouraging onshoring of energy supply chains via subsidies. Tariffs, like those that have been adopted recently, are a much cruder tool, causing price increases now in the hopes of eventually driving more domestic manufacturing. Next slide. So, tax credits for renewable energy are not something new. The wind production tax credit, which pays out as you generate electricity, has been around on and off since 1992. The solar investment tax credit, which pays up front to help defray the cost of the project, has been around since 2006. Not all tax credits are for renewables. Permanent subsidies for fossil fuels are built into the tax code, which amount to at least $14 billion a year. Next slide. As I mentioned, the heart and soul of the IRA is the technology-neutral clean electricity tax credits, which are just a souped-up version of the old ITC and PTC. Now, standalone energy storage projects can receive the ITC. It is technology-neutral. It's been expanded to include nuclear, wind, hydropower, and a bunch of other clean and near-clean ways to produce electricity. Very importantly, the IRA allowed a direct pay feature for non-taxable entities, which makes these longstanding tax credits, which have been hard to use for things like rural electric co-ops and municipalities, much easier to use. That direct pay is also available to state and local governments, tribes, churches, and nonprofits. Another important feature, which I know Excel very much values, is transferability, which is important for for-profit utilities who just don't happen to have a huge tax appetite relative to the amount of tax credits they're generating. As law stands today, the ITC, PTC for the electric sector will be available until 2032 or until national emissions from the electric sector are less than 25% of 2022 emission levels, whichever comes later. I expect at least that last part may be rolled back. Next slide. I won't focus on other tax credits, but there are a bunch of other tax credits out there that affect the electric sector and uses of electricity, including carbon capture and storage, clean hydrogen, biofuels, often made from electricity, and sustainable aviation fuel, often electric intensive production fuel production systems. Next slide. There are also electrifying transportation tax credits for individuals and for commercial and fleet. And as I mentioned before, there are important tax credit for supply chain and manufacturing onshoring, which have had the desired results as we're seeing, and hopefully they will continue, many, many new production facilities open, including things like the electrolyzer factory in Minnesota, the expansion of Helene, and other projects. Next slide. These are not your grandfather's ITC and PTC. The basic tax credit rate, if we just look at the ITC, is 6%, but that goes up to the traditional 30% if projects are employing labor that meets prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. And then there are bonuses available, a couple of them very hard to get, but one that we've seen active in Minnesota is the energy community bonuses, where new clean facilities that are built in communities that are losing fossil facilities get an extra 10% bonus on the ITC. There's also a domestic content bonus, so another, this time, pull instead of push for onshoring of manufacturing. And there are also tax credits available, bonuses available for low-income communities. Next slide. So that's the easiest to describe. The ITC in the extreme could go all the way up to 70% of a project cost. Again, that's hard to get to. If you want to think PTC side, it maxes out at $33 per megawatt hour. Next slide. We've seen the effect of those bonuses already in Minnesota. For instance, Sherco Solar, which is built in an energy community, was eligible for that bonus, which helped that project to pencil out. Next slide. Talking to my staff about what impacts we expect to see in Minnesota. They pulled together some estimates based just on the IOUs, so Minnesota Power, Xcel, and Ottertail integrated resource plans. They looked at projects from 2028 to 2032. My rates team also looked at rate cases. In that period, we're expecting somewhere in the vicinity of $5.5 to $6 billion in ITC, PTC income to Minnesota. That is a lowball estimate. We've already heard that's a lowball estimate from Xcel. It's an extreme lowball estimate because it doesn't include anything for the munis and co-ops either. More certain is that the IOUs will take in about $650 million in tax credits this year. Next slide. To look at the effect on rates, unfortunately, we don't have an elaborate analysis developed on our own yet. So I've pulled some of the already mentioned estimates that are more national, including some downscaling to Minnesota. First one is from the Rhodium Group, which released, I think, the first study on the effects of a repeal of the IRA. They used the They use a variation of the NEMS model from the US EIA. They looked at two scenarios combined. One is a rollback of EPA guidelines that were adopted in the last administration for the power industry, and the other is that plus a repeal of IRA tax credits. And they find that there's negative synergy there. If you add those two together by 2035, they're looking at energy costs, and this is not an electric sector specific. This is household energy costs, so it includes gas, heating, and electricity. They see rollbacks and repeals combined leading to a 7 to 12% increase in energy bills for U.S. households. Next slide. Specific to the electric sector is a study conducted by NERA for the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, and that's just looking at electric sector and what if the tax neutral ITC and PTC were repealed. They show increases nationwide ending in electric bills hitting fairly quickly, and for better for worse, the worst hit region of the United States is the north central region of the United States, with an expected 12% increase in electric rates by 2029 with a 2025 full repeal. Again, that's not really what we're hoping for or expecting. Next slide. Minnesota actually fares in their model a little better than the average upper Midwest state, with an expected increase in electric rates for Minnesota of about 10% by 2029. Next slide. study that Ms. Sohold already mentioned was conducted on behalf of a conservative clean energy group by the Brattle Group. And they pointed out a little bit of the whys we would expect these increases. And a lot of it has to do with supply chains and what can be built rapidly in response to the need for increased electricity for data centers or whatever reason. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the fastest way to increase our capacity is obviously to adopt things like grid enhancing technologies or reconductoring or virtual power plants. But the next fastest way to increase our capacity and actually focus on generation is to build out renewables and storage, because that's what we can deploy fast. That's what's in the queue, and that's what we actually have the supply chains to do. If you think there are supply chain problems in the renewable sector, wait till you see the natural gas turbine sector or the nuclear sector. So basically what Brattle shows is if you take the ITC and PTC away, two things happen. One, you build less new electricity, which drives up the cost of electricity as demand is rising. And two, the electricity you build, which will be wind and solar, because that's what you can build in the short time frame, will be more expensive. So it's a double whammy. They make the argument, which I'm hearing over and over, that if you do not have a natural gas turbine already on order, don't expect to get it this decade. So supply chain problems are not confined to the renewable sector. Next slide.
Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you. Can I just ask a quick question? Do you know specifically what it is that's causing the biggest issue for the gas turbines?
I think it is just manufacturing capacity, and I think there's going to be doubts in the manufacturing side about whether if we have a change in policy, whether that will be permanent. Okay. So I think there will probably be a delay in building out expanded capacity because of, what we hear always from the utilities, which is right, and from the developers, what the industry doesn't like from manufacturing through developers through utilities is uncertainty and flipping back and forth on policy.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. As already mentioned, this particular study shows a 14% increase by 2035 of electric rates. So obviously we're seeing different outcomes from different studies, but they're all in the same direction and kind of within the same magnitude. Next slide. The Brattle Group also goes on to show that because we expect increased energy prices, that will cause ripples throughout the economy, so a substantial hit to the U.S. economy by the repeal of these tax credits, way in excess of the actual value of the tax credits. Next slide. A different group, Energy Innovation, did a similar modeling exercise and downscaled to Minnesota. They show a full repeal, reducing the size of Minnesota's GDP by $4 billion by 2030, a little less by 2035, so that's annual GDP numbers.
And this is specific to the ITC and the PTC?
This is specific to the tax credits and other not allocated yet funding, which isn't much, so it's mostly
we're just talking about when it says repealing federal funding and tax credits, yes. Just energy tax credits.
Just energy tax credits,
okay.
Yep. Just because I couldn't think off the top of my head, how big is that? I looked up the Minnesota GDP is about $400 billion, so it's about a 1% hit. That's what I have to say about tax credits. I don't know if you want me to keep going into the other two things to finish up here quickly, or whether you want to go back to Excel, who was also going to talk about uncertainty around grants.
Why don't we take questions on the tax credits? Commissioner Hunt.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I don't know whether it's a fair question to you, but I think you have to know how MISO is dispatching energy to answer this question. So if you need help, you can ask help. So as of today, I think even if the LMP is a -10, wind and solar can produce their energy because the PTC can cover the negative portion, still they're in positive. So if those PTC goes away, then potentially it can increase that curtailment of the wind and solar. Given that those rural Minnesota who's hosting these energy facility heavily rely on property tax through the energy production tax credit. So I don't know whether there is a potential estimate for what is the potential negative impact to those host community in the rural Minnesota due to this total repeal of this energy production PTC, because potentially they are losing more revenue because if energy is not produced, then directly they'll have an impact to their property tax collection.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I don't have an estimate for that. We can see if we can get one for you, but I'm not sure how to quantify that.
Yeah, I don't know whether we need it, but you may want to communicate with the rural counties who's hosting, like a southwestern Minnesota and all other community who's hosting solar, because they are willing to sacrifice their land to get this property tax through the energy production tax credit. But if they are losing that, it can have a very, very negative impact to them in addition to this direct impact to the rates.
And maybe Ms. Solholt, did you want to add to that or comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sieben and Commissioner Hom. That's a great point. I mean, there are many, many areas of Minnesota and the country that are benefiting from projects. And if there is a reduction in tax credits, that does impact LMPs. It does impact dispatch. We even know that when, the scenario can change when a developer repowers and gets the tax credit, for an additional 10 years. So the other data point I would just point out is that we know that, far over 70% of the conservative areas in the country are receiving benefits from clean energy projects. And so there are many layers to this issue. There's not just one layer. What's the impact to utility ratepayers? It is many layers deep, and this is an important one. A voice that needs to be heard with congressional folks when they're thinking about what to do on this tax policy. So we are in frequent communication with the Minnesota Rural Energy Board, that is the 18 counties in Southwest Minnesota. Perhaps a concerted effort to tell legislators how important this is in order.
And Chair, Commissioner, if I can follow up. So I just found the area where we do have the property tax numbers. For the planned side of that slide, it's in the range of 22 million annually. And for existing, it's in the range of 9 million. And I would just note, that when we go out to DC, we're going to these districts where, and we actually have one-pagers to talk to those federal legislators and to say, here are the projects that are either existing in your region or are planned, and here are the potential impacts. So that's kind of a big advocacy lever that we are using when we think about talking to these policymakers and showing them, here's why it should matter to you. And that's a little bit what's leading to these letters from that I mentioned, the Senate and the House, saying, think closely and clearly about what you're doing here because it's going to impact local communities and landowners in a major way.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah, I think $22 million seems like a big number in the overall energy industry, but it can be a huge number for those counties because they heavily rely on this revenue for their budget. If they don't collect this money, they have to increase their property tax. And then residents of those counties can have a double whammy, not only increasing in the energy costs, but they have to pay high property tax.
Thanks, Commissioner. Great.
Ms. Rome, did you want to continue on the rest of your presentation about the tax credits, or I mean the projects too that you were going to talk about?
Chair, I absolutely can do that. And then to the extent we want to hit tariffs and other things, happy to address that. But the only slide I have remaining is the Minnesota Department of Energy awards. So we can go to that. Chair, you certainly know, and other commissioners, that we've been very active growing research and development funding at DOE for many years. And since the passage of the IIJA, we've been successful at winning over $450 million of grants, and roughly 2/3 of that goes directly to Minnesotans, and this is important, if we're able to fully invoice the DOE for those. And so you can see on this slide, and I don't need to necessarily go through each project unless there are specific questions as to them, and then I'm happy to do my best to address those. But you can see the status on the right. None have been to date outright canceled, where we've seen the Department of Energy to come back and say, we're not going to fund this project anymore. I will tell this group that we have had contact with the Department of Energy, who is getting requests from DOJ around, what's this project? Tell us about this project. Tell us about this project. And so we're responding and providing what I would say is sort of advocacy around, why are these projects important? Why should you continue to fund them and allow this to go forward? So that's a bit of where we are. You can see that for some, we're actually receiving reimbursements. For some, we're invoicing. The work continues on all of it. But we are hearing activity that's going on around these projects.
And for example, like all of these projects, I think the overall point is, well, maybe the hydrogen hub is still sort of tentative on whether it will go forward or not, but the hydrogen demonstration project is it's happening, correct? Like it's up and
correct.
And the funds are expended. The foreign batteries, same thing, it's in progress. The wildfire mitigation, these projects, again, like still need to happen and are still going to be cost passed on to ratepayers. But if the DOE rescinds on its earlier awards, then more costs could be shifted to ratepayers, because the utility and the commission and other stakeholders have all indicated support for the necessity of doing things like the JTIQ transmission portfolio. It's already established, like it's already going to happen, right? And if we don't get the remaining portions of these grants, it will just flow into rates.
Chair, there are a number of these that are ongoing and have started, as you mentioned. I think you identified the exception there and hub on the bottom, but a ton of work was done by Xcel Energy and partners in the Department of Energy to really make sure before year end last year we got to signatures, we got to execution, to give ourselves the best opportunity to make sure we execute on this and get these funds for our customers. But I think you framed the issue correctly. The other thing I would note that everyone in this room and on the call is likely aware, about 50% of the staff has been reduced at the Department of Energy who work on these programs. And so there's an administrative piece to this that we have our eye on too. Worst case scenario, we are considering all the options to make sure that we can move forward with these. But so far, so good in the sense that we haven't heard stop work on that. And there's been a lot of advocacy around it.
And the Xcel has talked a lot about, and we have appreciated, I think, the impact that the tax credits have had on specific projects, most explicitly Sherco Solar. And I know there are filings in this docket already that I believe that help articulate the overall, like how that helped reduce the cost to consumers for ongoing projects like Sherco Solar, or like we heard from Minnesota Power for Boswell Solar that they're going to construct. But this slide just articulates awarded projects that are, I think, for our regulatory sphere, there's a whole nother long list of projects as all of our utilities build out more clean energy projects, that because of the tax credits, it's substantially lowering the overall price of projects that results in cheaper energy costs that consumers pay as well.
Yes, Chair. I mean, the first slide is a $12 billion number. These are just the DOE grants that we have taken through execution and are trying to complete.
Dr. Wyckoff, anything else to add on awarded project costs and, this slide or others that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, so here's my slides on the same topic. So we dealt with an initial funding freeze, just one sort of broader context. We've heard the size of the tax credits, and they are in the many billions of dollars. Our calculations are that there's about $1 billion in federal funds that the Department of Commerce has explicitly under contract from IIJA and IRA that will help reduce electric sector costs. But there's about $3.5 billion in Minnesota overall. So some of the grants that we just heard about, I think most of the grants we just heard about, Minnesota as a state entity is not a partner. So we're trying to keep track of both. $3.5 billion of grant money is a lot too. It's not in the same order of magnitude that we're talking, or the same magnitude that we're talking about, but it's important. Particularly, I would point out the New Era program for our rural electric co-ops, where I was pleased that a couple days ago, the Trump administration reaffirmed the Biden administration award to Dairyland, and we hope to see quickly follow up with reaffirmation around other grants to Minnesota rural co-ops, and they are substantial. We dealt with an initial funding freeze across the board of all of our IIJA and IRA funding. Thanks is owed to Attorney General Ellison's office and many other like-minded attorney generals for the yeoman's job they've been doing on legal action, and I credit that with the fact that most of our money is actually flowing right now. We hope to keep it that way. Exceptions are programs that are explicitly focused on environmental justice. And we know that, probably because we have attorney generals to lean on and others don't, that funding flow is not so good to non-state entities from these programs. So that's relatively good news right now. And we're hearing the same thing from Excel here today. Next slide. So this is not a IRA or IIJA grant thing, but it is something we are very much watching and something that threatens energy affordability in a different way. Just as we've heard that there's been many staffing cuts in DOE programs, and it is hitting all the programs we work with, all of the folks who worked on the LIHEAP or Energy Assistance Program at HHS were laid off. We are still owed 10% of our funding for this year for energy assistance and are about to run out of money for this year. And we're also, thanks to a leaked document, expecting a zero proposed budget for energy assistance to come from the president when he releases his budget in a few weeks, if that leaked document is true. So we're really worried about this. This is not good for Minnesota low-income folks who are struggling with energy burden. Obviously, it is terrible. I will point out on the upside, the president in his first term, I think, tried to zero out in his budget energy assistance every year, and it never actually happened. So we're not taking it as a fait accompli, but we are concerned.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. I was actually just kind of internalizing what you just said, Dr. Wyckoff, there about they zero out LIHEAP entirely. But I was wondering are you aware of, I had seen something in the paper that they were going to be bringing back the LIHEAP and weatherization folks, but I don't know if that is just a rumor and not substantiated, but I'm wondering if you have any information on whether those folks are back. And then I know Minnesota I think Minnesota is still waiting to receive its final with the 10% payment for the year, but if you could just give us an update on that.
We are still waiting to receive our final 10%. I think everybody nationally is waiting for their final 10%. Is not a singling out of Minnesota, but the situation is we need a timely resolution on that. It's hard to keep up with the staffing changes from day to day, so I won't speculate. We have been aware of dramatic cuts at LIHEAP and expected dramatic cuts at weatherization. Maybe there's been a rethinking. I don't have current information.
Is that your last slide, Dr. Wyckoff? Or?
I'll just end with, and I don't need a slide, or I can. We're also worried, and there'll be many, many conversations about this with new executive orders in the power sector, which I'm sure will come up at the PUC, really attempting to meddle with state policy, much of it trying to preserve coal plants or encourage the use of coal. That is not usually the low-cost way to provide energy. So we put that on our list of possible inflationary moves. We were pleased to see Michigan Public Utilities, DTE, and Consumers Energy come out very aggressively saying they were going to proceed on their retirement schedule. And I would note, next slide, that we were pleased to see the Commission reaffirm in the IRP orders that came out yesterday that we expect Xcel to also hold on to its retirement schedule. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I think one, and Commissioner Partridge and I were talking about this before the meeting started, one challenge that we have collectively as a commission and state agencies and stakeholders here is quantifying, is differentiating between like speculative things that may happen at the federal level and impact our utilities and ratepayers versus quantifying benefits that we have already seen happen as a result of let's just like narrow it down to like as a result of the IRA and the IIJA that have been filed already in this docket. And so I'm curious, like after this presentation, not just for, Ms. Rome, you're the only utility up here, but is it feasible for our utilities, our investor-owned utilities, including gas utilities that aren't represented here, to do another filing that articulates or specifies the benefits of the IRA and the IIJA year to date? You know, like what we've actually seen happen. It would be, I would think of it, I'm looking at Mr. Harsh because he's our staff assigned to it, where the utilities would file, like since your last filing, which I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so I'm not sure when it is, but like what benefits have our utilities seen as a result of the IRA and the IIJA to date? And do we need an updated filing to document that? Ms. Partridge, do you think that's sort of what our conversation was about? Do you think that's what we need? And then what other layers should we add in, like the per household annual benefit, things like that?
Yeah, I think that, Chair Sieben, I think that would be helpful to have, you know, here's the total benefit, maybe broken out by the, you know, ITC, PTC, all the different components, and then that we have seen to date. And then maybe also the expected benefit, you know, similar to what you have, Ms. Rome, in your slides here to say, but just specific to Minnesota, you know, here's the benefit we would expect, which may help us to kind of track how things are playing out. And the estimated impact on residential rates from what we have received to date versus what we expect going forward.
Ms. Rome.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Partridge. Yeah, I mean, these are Minnesota specific.
Okay.
So, we would be happy to do that, whatever would be helpful. And I would just also know if I didn't say it, when we think about, I was talking about the most likely outcome when I started, which is some sort of rollback, not a full repeal. We have been anticipating some sort of move since the election kind of on this. And so we've done a lot of work, safe harboring components and things of that nature. So, I mean, we've essentially safe harbored all of our base for our 5-year capital plan. We've safe harbored materials for that. So we feel really good about that. So where you'll see these numbers depend on the scenario you're talking about. So you might see less of an impact in this middle, 5-year, and even to the right, the 5-year. It's after that time period. And then we'll be speculating what would the rollback look like, what would the drawdown look like, and we can provide scenarios just like in any other setting, but just want to give you some thoughts on what you might see there. And it might be different by utility. It will be.
Sure. Chair Sieben, if I can, could you though just provide what you expect the benefits to be absent a change in policy?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Partridge, yeah.
Okay.
Status quo, that's the baseline.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like, and then there could be scenarios based off of that. But if all you want is the baseline, absolutely.
I think so. I think, speculating scenarios becomes, you're never right. I think just us getting a good picture of here's what's at stake, here's what we have received and here's what's at stake, could be helpful.
Using some historical data as far as production, things of that nature.
And your IRP data, yeah. Chair Sieben, I do have some additional questions that are not along that line. I think this is probably probably for everybody, but for both of you. So a couple things. One is that in addition to the grants that the utilities received, and I think that Dr. Wyckoff has mentioned this already, in addition to the grants to utilities, there were many grants that went to local communities, nonprofit organizations to do work related to energy through the IRA, and some of those have been clawed back. And so could you maybe speak to what you think the impact will be with those, and whether those are the types of programs that need to be picked up by another entity and put, kind of move cost elsewhere?
Yeah, so first of all, it's somewhat hard for us to get a complete handle on these things. So we're working with MMB Office of Federal Funds and with our federal delegation and with, who we know in the communities that have in stakeholders and communities that have these grants. There's been a lot of rollback, attempted cancellations, which become effective cancellations if you can't sue, of things to community groups, things to the university, and a lot of it is focused on programs that are seeking to bring these benefits to diverse Minnesota communities, to low-income Minnesota communities. There's been a real direct attack on the environmental justice portion of the IRA. We've been talking with philanthropy and others about whether there's a way to pick up some of the slack, but it's still a situation in progress.
Okay.
Our only cancellation right now at the department is a specific environmental justice grant. And we are challenging that cancellation.
Okay. And what about, there's a grant for codes work?
Yep. So
Has that
that's
been
another
canceled?
way. There's a grant for codes work that has been canceled that the lead is an NGO you are familiar with.
Yeah.
So there's, not to be cynical, I think the attempted cancellations have come more strategically lately at groups who are likely not to have the resources
To sue.
to sue.
Sure. My other question is around the home energy rebate programs that we were hoping to see rolled out this year. What is the status of
Money is flowing.
Okay.
We are still moving forward.
Great.
And we have been back in touch with the DOE about it. So I'm going to take current status as good news. We'll see how things progress. But it, like everything else, had been frozen, but is unfrozen. Great.
I guess the only other thing I wanted to say is, I think we have seen that this is, any change in policy has the potential to really impact utility system costs. And then I really appreciated the slides that you provided, Deputy Commissioner, for the impact we would have on the economy more broadly. So we're seeing, rising energy costs, hit to the economy. And Commissioner Hom really pointed out a very important thing, which is this will also cause a hit to local property taxes and the budgets that school districts and cities have to support their community, and that will also drive up taxes. It will drive up all of the products that are made in Minnesota because of that additional energy cost. And so it's really hitting on so many different things. The community grants that we're losing as well, that were there to help people save energy and to access some of the opportunities through the IRA to save energy, save money, and avoid some additional costs on our electric grid. It's really kind of a full court press on affordability and the economy of our state. And so it's really hard to track these things, as Chair Sieben said. So I really appreciate you bringing that data to us. And I guess my final statement is, this isn't really political. This is about the costs that Minnesotans incur and the burden that they have on not just energy, but also on all of the cost of living. And so to your point, Deputy Commissioner, there are lots of people and entities who cannot, do not have the ability to bring a lawsuit or to have their voice heard at the national level. And so I really appreciate the work that Excel is doing, that the other utilities are doing, the Department of Commerce and the Office of the Attorney General, to try to bring that voice up so that people can hear who have power to maybe continue to hold the line on some of these really important policies. So thank you.
Good points, Commissioner Partridge. I think the question the commissioners should consider is whether we should specifically direct the utilities to make a filing of what we were asking for, or we could leave it to staff to issue a filing or an IR that is a little more thought out than trying to figure it out here from the bench in terms of like what we're looking for. We do, and to Dr. Wyckoff, we have the joint docket open with Commerce about the IRA and the IIJA and the benefits. And I think it is time for like a filing update from our utilities so that we can get the information that we want to be able to better articulate the benefits we've seen. So are you okay with the idea that our staffs could work jointly together to issue a notice to kind of like ask our utilities to update the docket and what we're looking for?
Yeah, just what my staff want is the boss just freelancing. But yes, I think we're okay with that.
I think it might be easier than trying to like figure out the right language now and the filing date and stuff like that. But it does seem that this docket, we could have an updated round of information filed so that it's visible to the public and to all of us. And then to the broader point of, I also think the point, and I really appreciate all of the comments that were made today, it is incumbent on us as state entities and agencies to help articulate to the public the impact that federal decisions can make on our on ratepayers and on customers. So that's in the interest of what we're trying to do here, is raise the general understanding of the benefits and the impacts of what the costs to consumers will be if there are changes in federal policy that will impact customers. So thank you very much for all the presentations today, and to our staff who has been great about working on this docket and helping us think through these things as well. So any other comments, commissioners? Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. So once again, I think affordability is relative value, rates, and income. Based on what we see and what I see, that rural Minnesota is going to have a potential significant negative impact to their income due to this export-import fighting. So now we have a 10% increase in the rates. Doesn't mean it's just 10% increase in the rural Minnesota. It can be impact can be 20% or 30% because their income is going down. So I think we have to see this as a very significant issue, particularly for the rural Minnesota, because their income have a very significant negative impact from this recent tariff fight. So I think not only is going to have a damage to the absolute level of the energy price, but the affordability, which is a relative ratio, can significantly worsen for the rural Minnesota unless the federal government changes their policy on this.
Good point, Commissioner Hom. Anything else to add? Otherwise, thank you very much, folks, for being here and being online, and we appreciate the discussion today and look forward to more work on this topic. So thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.